My wife spent 41 years building something quietly, and I never knew the half of it until she was gone. The morning the attorney read her will, I sat across a mahogany table from my daughter and her husband, and I watched their faces change the way weather changes. Slowly, then all at once. My wife's name was June Alderton. She grew up in a small town outside Knoxville, Tennessee, the youngest of 3 girls, daughter of a coal miner who never made it past 8th grade, but who owned 40 acres of land that had been in the family since before the Civil War. June used to tell me about those hills when we were first dating, how the light came through the trees in October, how her grandmother made apple butter on a wood-burning stove, how the land smelled after rain. I never thought much about that land. I was a high school shop teacher from Akron, Ohio. Land in Tennessee seemed like something from another world. We got married in June of 1981. I was 29. She was 26, fresh out of a nursing degree program, working double shifts at Akron City Hospital. We had nothing. A studio apartment, a hand-me-down couch, and a savings account that barely covered 2 months of groceries. What we had was each other, and for a long time that felt like more than enough. Our daughter, Nadia, was born in 1984. Our son-in-law's name is Preston, though he didn't come into the picture until much later. Nadia met him at a corporate conference in Columbus when she was 32. He worked in commercial real estate. He had a firm handshake, a practiced smile, and eyes that were always calculating something just behind whatever he was saying to your face. I never warmed to him. June tolerated him. That's the most honest way I can put it. In 2019, June was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Stage 3. She was 64 years old. She had spent 30 years working her way from floor nurse to hospital administrator. She had a pension, a 401(a), and a life insurance policy I didn't even know the full value of until after she was gone. She was meticulous about money, the way she was meticulous about everything. Quietly, without drawing attention to it. After the diagnosis, she started spending time on the phone with her estate attorney, a woman named Sandra Holt, who had an office downtown, and who June had apparently been seeing for years without mentioning it to me. She started taking day trips to Tennessee. She told me she was visiting her sister. I believed her. I was too busy holding her hand through chemotherapy to push for details. She died on March 3, 2022, 67 years old. She died at home in our bedroom, with my hand in hers, and the last thing she said to me, the last clear thing, before her voice gave out completely, was this: "Don't let them take the land, Ray. It's yours. Go there and you'll understand." I didn't understand. Not yet. The will reading was 3 weeks later. Nadia and Preston sat across from me at Sandra's conference table. Preston was wearing a suit like he was closing a deal. Nadia had her hands folded in her lap, very still, in the way that meant she already knew what was coming and had already decided how she felt about it. Sandra began reading. June had left the house, our house, the 4-bedroom colonial in Fairlawn, where we had lived for 22 years, to Nadia. Appraised value, $480,000. She had left her retirement accounts, totaling roughly $340,000, split evenly between Nadia and a list of charitable organizations June had quietly supported for years. And to me, she left the land, the 40 acres, in Claiborne County, Tennessee. The family, land her father, had left her when he passed, an old farmhouse, a barn, a creek running along the eastern edge of the property. County appraisal, $67,000. Preston sat up straighter when Sandra read that number, not because it was impressive, because it wasn't. $67,000, he said, like he was reading a footnote. For 40 acres and a shack. The property has been in the family since 1887, Sandra said, without looking up. It holds significant personal history. Personal history doesn't pay property taxes, Preston said. Nadia placed her hand on his arm. Preston. He shook his head. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. I didn't say anything. My throat was too tight. I kept thinking about June on our wedding day, 26 years old, laughing at something I'd said in the parking lot outside the courthouse. I kept thinking about the way she'd looked when Nadia was born, exhausted and radiant and already planning something I couldn't see yet. Sandra slid an envelope across the table toward me. My name was written on the front in June's handwriting, careful, precise, slightly slanted to the right. "Your wife left instructions," Sandra said quietly. "This is to be opened at the property in Tennessee. She was very specific about that." I picked up the envelope. It was cream-colored, heavy. The flap was sealed with a small wax circle. Preston looked at it, then he looked at me. "Dad," Nadia said, and something in the way she said it made the word sound like a transaction. "We've been talking, and we think it might make more sense if you just sign the Tennessee property over to us. You're 68 years old. You don't want to be managing land 3 states away. We could sell it, add it to the estate funds. Make sure everything is handled properly." "Your mother left it to me," I said. "She left it to you because she loved you," Nadia said. "But practically speaking, I'll think about it." Preston exhaled through his nose. "Don't take too long," he said. 14 taxes, $1,000 due by June 30th. If you can't pay, the county can move to auction. I looked at him. "How do you know about the property taxes?" He didn't answer right away. Then I did some research. I like to understand the full picture. Sandra walked us out. At the door, she touched my arm briefly. "Call me," she said, quiet enough that only I heard. "There are some things we should discuss privately." I drove home alone. The house didn't feel like the house anymore. June's reading glasses were still on the end table beside the couch. Her coffee mug, the blue one with the chipped handle she refused to throw away, was still in the dish rack. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, not moving. That night, Nadia called. "I want you to know," she said, "that Preston and I have already spoken to a real estate attorney about the Tennessee property. Before the will was even read," I asked. A pause. "We wanted to be prepared." "For what?" Another pause. "Dad, you need to be realistic about this. You're on a teacher's pension. What are you going to do with 40 acres of land in Tennessee? You've never even been there." "Your mother left it to me," I said again. I seemed to keep saying that. "Mom wasn't always practical about sentimental things," Nadia said, and something about the way she said it, the flatness of it, the ease, made me go very still. "Good night, Nadia," I said, and I hung up. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark in the same bed where June had died 6 months earlier, and I listened to the house settle around me, and I thought about 40 acres in the mountains of Tennessee that I had never seen and that apparently everyone in my life wanted me to hand over without a second thought. 3 weeks after the will reading, Nadia and Preston arrived at the house with a folder. It was a Saturday morning. I was drinking coffee on the porch when their car pulled into the driveway. Preston was wearing khakis and a golf shirt. He carried the folder the way people carry things when they want you to know the contents are inevitable. "We need to talk about a plan," he said, settling himself at the kitchen table without being invited. I sat down across from him. He opened the folder. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a quitclaim deed, a form that would transfer my ownership of the Tennessee property to Nadia and Preston. The second was a letter from a company called Summit Land Acquisitions, LLC, offering to purchase 40 acres in Claiborne County, Tennessee, for the sum of $95,000. "We've already been in contact with a buyer," Preston said. "They're interested in the land for recreational development. The offer is good for 30 days. "A buyer," I said slowly. "You found a buyer for land that isn't yours yet." "We're trying to help you," Nadia said. I looked at my daughter. She met my eyes for just a moment, then looked away. "Your property taxes are already overdue," Preston continued. "The county will start the lien process if you don't pay by June 30th. That's 11 weeks. You don't have that kind of cash sitting around, do you?" He already knew the answer. "Sign the quitclaim deed," he said. "We'll cover the taxes, handle the sale, and give you $20,000 from the proceeds. You walk away clean. $20,000 from a $95,000 sale, for land my wife's family had owned for 135 years. I folded my hands on the table. "I'll think about it." Preston's jaw tightened. "Don't think too long," he said. "The clock is running." After they left, I sat at the kitchen table alone for a long time. Then I went upstairs and found the sealed envelope from Sandra's office. I'd put it in the drawer of my nightstand, tucked under June's last birthday card to me, which I had never been able to throw away. I turned it over in my hands. My name in her handwriting. Don't open this until you're at the property. That night, I called Sandra. I've been waiting for you to call, she said. I told her about the quitclaim deed, about Summit Land acquisitions, about Preston's timeline. There was a silence on the other end of the line. Ray, she said, I need you to do something for me. Don't sign anything, not yet. And I need you to go to Tennessee. What's in the envelope, Sandra? I honestly don't know everything, she said. June sealed it herself. But I know this. She spent the last 2 years doing things with that property that she didn't want anyone to know about until you were standing on the land. She was very deliberate. A pause. She also asked me to tell you one thing, if you called me before going. What? She said to tell you. The land knows things I never had the words to say. My throat tightened. That sounded exactly like June. It sounded like something she would whisper to me in the dark, half asleep, in that way she had of being more honest when the lights were off. Go to Tennessee, Sandra said. Call me when you get there. I drove down 2 weeks later, 12 hours. Through Ohio, into Kentucky, and then the mountains of Tennessee rising up on either side of the road. Green and enormous and older than anything I could put a name to. I had the sealed envelope on the passenger seat. I had June's photograph tucked in my shirt pocket, the one from our vacation in Gatlinburg in 2009, where she'd stood on a hiking trail with her face tipped up toward the sun, like she was trying to memorize it. I found the property at the end of a gravel road, 6 miles off the state highway. A hand-painted mailbox leaned at the end of the driveway, the name Alderton fading but still legible. The farmhouse was small, white clapboard siding gone grey with age, a porch with a sagging rail, a stone chimney running up one side, dark with years of wood smoke. Behind it, maybe 100 yards back, a barn, older than the house by the look of it, with a rusted tin roof and walls, weathered to the colour of driftwood. I stepped out of the car and just stood there. It was quiet in a way that felt almost physical. Whined through the tree line. Birds. The distant sound of water. The creek, I realized, just over a rise to the east. I walked up to the porch. The boards creaked under my feet. Beside the front door, someone had left a clay pot with a dried lavender sprig stuck into the soil. I didn't know who had done that. It seemed deliberate. I unlocked the door with the old iron key Sandra had given me at the will reading. It opened with a sound like an exhale. Inside, one main room, a narrow kitchen, 2 small bedrooms, old furniture covered in dust, a wood stove in the corner, and on the kitchen table, as if someone had left it there for me, a second envelope. Same cream-colored paper, same handwriting. Ray, open this one first. I sat down at the table and opened it. My love, if you're reading this, you drove 12 hours to get here, which tells me everything I needed to know. There are 3 things I need to tell you. The first is in the barn. Go to the loft. The ladder is on the north wall. There's a metal box under the tarp in the far corner. The iron key opens it. The second is in the envelope you brought from Sandra's office. Open that one after. The third is something I'll tell you myself in this letter, because I couldn't say it out loud without losing my nerve. Ray, I've known for about 2 years what Nadia and Preston have been planning. I found out by accident a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear the summer before I got sick. Preston has been working with a land acquisition company called Summit. They are not a recreational developer. I looked into them. They are a front company for a mineral rights acquisition firm out of Chattanooga. These 40 acres sit directly above a formation of high-quality marble and Tennessee pink granite. Commercial quarrying estimates put the value of the extractable stone at somewhere between $12 and $18 million over 20 years. Summit knows this. Preston knows this. That's why they want the land. I spent the last 2 years making sure they couldn't have it. Go to the barn. Everything you need is there. I love you. I have always loved you. Junie set the letter down. My hands were shaking. I went to the barn. The ladder was exactly where she said. I climbed into the loft, ducking under a low rafter, and swept my flashlight across the space. Old hay bales, a broken chair, mouse droppings, and in the far corner, beneath a faded canvas tarp, a metal box, military green with a brass latch. The iron key fit. Inside were 4 folders, neatly labeled in June's handwriting. Geological Survey, Claiborne County Parcel 114B, Preston Voss Financial Records, Summit Land Acquisitions, Corporate Records, Trust Documents, and resting on top, one more envelope. My name on the front. I sat down on a hay bale and opened it. Ray, here is what I found and what I did about it. Preston has been in contact with Summit Land Acquisitions since September 2020. 14 months before my diagnosis. Their plan was always to wait until I was gone and then pressure you into signing over the land before you understood its value. Preston told them you were, and I am quoting from an email I found in Nadia's drafts folder that she forgot to delete. Not the sharpest guy, easy to manage, won't fight it. I want you to know that I did not confront Nadia about this. I considered it for a long time. In the end, I decided that confronting her would only give them time to adjust the plan. So I built a wall instead. The Geological Survey folder contains independent assessments commissioned in my name from 2 separate firms. The marble formation is real. The value is real. I have already signed a partnership agreement with a company called Alderton Stone Works, named for my family, that will handle all quarrying operations at my direction. You retain 70% of net royalties. They cover all operating costs. The agreement was finalized and notarized 8 months ago. The trust documents explain the rest. The property is held in an irrevocable trust in your name. No power of attorney, no quitclaim deed, and no court order can transfer it without your explicit, witnessed, revocable consent, which you will never give to Preston. There is also a provision in the trust. If Nadia or Preston attempt to contest the will, challenge the trust, pursue any legal action to claim the property, or conduct any transaction with Summit Land Acquisitions or its affiliated entities, they forfeit the house and the retirement accounts I left them. Everything. Sandra has a copy. The attorney I hired to draft the trust has a copy. And there is a third copy in a safe deposit box at First National Bank in Tazewell, along with a letter addressed to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation describing Summit's fraudulent misrepresentation of their company's purpose to the county assessor's office. I spent 2 years building this while I was dying. I hope it was enough. Don't be angry at Nadia. Be sad. There's a difference. She chose Preston over you, and that is her loss, not your failure. You were a good father. You were a good husband. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. And I say that knowing full well it sounds like something you'd read on a greeting card. And I don't care. Go live, Ray. Please, just go live. All my love, always. Junie don't know how long I sat in that loft. Long enough for the light through the cracks in the barn wall to shift from afternoon gold to something cooler and grey. Eventually I climbed down. I walked back to the farmhouse. I sat on the porch steps and called Sandra. I found the box, I said. Good, she said. Are you okay? I don't know, I said honestly. That's fair, she said. Take tonight. Tomorrow I'll drive down and we'll go through everything together. Sandra, I said. The quarry agreement. Is it real? Is it solid? June spent 4 months negotiating it, Sandra said. I was there for most of those conversations. She knew what she was worth, and she made sure the agreement reflected it. I looked out at the tree line. The mountains behind it, blue-grey in the evening light, the same mountains June's grandmother had looked at from this same porch 80 years ago. She never told me any of this, I said. She didn't want you to carry it while she was still alive, Sandra said. She wanted you present. She said if you knew what Preston was planning, you'd spend her last months fighting instead of just being with her. I closed my eyes. She was right. She was always right. That night, a man knocked on the farmhouse door at around 7:30. I answered it cautiously. He was in his mid-60s, wearing a flannel shirt and work boots with the kind of weathered face you get from decades outdoors. He introduced himself as Corbett Finch. He ran a small equipment repair shop 2 miles down the road. He'd known June's family for 40 years. She called me last November, he said. Asked me to keep an eye on the place. Said her husband would be coming eventually and might need some help getting settled. He held up a covered dish. My wife made beef stew. Figured you hadn't eaten. I let him in. We ate at the kitchen table, and Corbett told me about June's visits to the property over the last 2 years. She'd come 4 or 5 times, he said. Always alone. She'd met with the geologist here, walked the land with them, stood at the creek and pointed out the rock formations she wanted surveyed. She knew this land better than most people know their own backyard, he said. Her grandfather taught her. She used to come up here summers when she was a girl. He looked at me. She ever tell you that? Not enough, I said. Well, he pushed back from the table. She talked about you plenty. Said you were the kind of man who did right by people without needing anyone to notice. He picked up his hat, said that was the rarest thing she'd ever found. After he left, I sat on the porch in the dark for a long time. My phone buzzed at 9:15. Preston. I almost didn't answer. Then I stopped. Something made me open the voice memo app first. Then I answered. Ray. His voice was careful, smooth. I wanted to check in. See how you're doing with everything. I'm in Tennessee, I said. A pause. At the property? Yes. Another pause. Longer. Well, the offer from Summit is still on the table. 30 days, like I said. I just want to make sure you understand the timeline. I appreciate that, I said. Have you given any more thought to the quitclaim deed? I've been thinking about a lot of things, I said. Ray. His voice shifted slightly. I have to be honest with you. Nadia and I have already spoken to an attorney about petitioning for conservatorship if you continue to resist reasonable financial planning. You're 68 years old, recently widowed, living alone, no consistent income beyond a pension. A judge would take that seriously. I let the silence sit for a moment. Preston, I said. I want you to know that I recorded this conversation. Another silence. Longer. I also want you to know, I continued, that I've spoken to Sandra Holt, and I've read everything June left for me in the barn. Everything. I paused. Including her notes on Summit land acquisitions and their actual business purpose, which is not recreational development. Nothing on the other end of the line. If you file a conservatorship petition, I said, the trust provision triggers. You lose the house. You lose the retirement accounts. You lose everything June left Nadia, and the documentation she compiled about Summit goes to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. I let that land. Or you don't file, and we move on. Those are the options. I heard him breathing. Think about it, I said, and I ended the call. Sandra arrived the next morning with coffee and a banker's box. We spent 4 hours at the kitchen table going through the trust documents, the quarry partnership agreement, and June's research files on Summit. Everything was exactly as June's letter had described. Ironclad was the word Sandra kept using. June had used an attorney from Nashville who specialized in estate and mineral rights law, and she had not left a single thread loose. She was something, Sandra said at one point, not to me specifically, just to the room. Yeah, I said. She was. 2 days later, Nadia called. Preston told me what you said, she said. Her voice was flat. About the trust, okay, I said. I want you to know that I wasn't. She stopped. Started again. I didn't know about Summit, what they really were. I thought it was just land development. I didn't say anything. I thought we were helping you, she said. I thought the property was just sitting there, worthless, and you'd be better off with the cash. Your mother knew what was under this land, I said. She spent 2 years figuring it out. Silence. She was protecting me, I said. She knew what Preston was planning long before I did, and she spent her last 2 years building something to make sure it didn't work. Nadia was quiet for a long time. I didn't know that, she finally said. I believe you, I said, and I meant it, partly. But believing you doesn't change what almost happened. She started to say something else. I told her I needed time, and I hung up. I wasn't ready to have that conversation. I'm not sure I'll ever be completely ready. There's a kind of grief that comes with understanding that the person your child chose is someone who saw you as an obstacle, and that your child let it go on as long as it did. That's a different grief from losing June. Quitter, maybe. But it doesn't go away. The quarry operations began 14 months after I first unlocked the farmhouse door. Alderton Stoneworks brought in a small crew. 7 men, eventually growing to 12, and began the extraction process along the northern edge of the property, well away from the creek and the old growth timber on the eastern slope. The first royalty check arrived on a Tuesday morning in May of the following year. Corbett had driven down to the post office for me. I'd been dealing with a slow pipe leak in the kitchen and was up to my elbows in it when he knocked. "Something official looking from Alderton," he said, setting the envelope on the counter. I dried my hands and opened it. The check was for $187,000, 1/4 royalties, 70% of net as agreed. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd read June's letters, and stared at the number for a while. Then I called Sandra. "The first check came," I said. "How much?" she asked. I told her. A beat of silence. "Ray," she said, "you know what June would say." "I know exactly what she'd say," I said. I knew because she'd written it in her last letter, "Go live," and because I'd read that letter enough times by then that I could recite it in my sleep, and because June had always been more interested in what money could build than what it could buy. I spent the next 6 months doing something I'd never done before, talking to people, a financial advisor, a local non-profit board, the principal of the elementary school in the county seat, a woman who ran a small resource center for families dealing with cancer treatment costs, the kind of expenses that don't show up in any budget, the hotel rooms near the hospital, the gas money, the meals. I know something about that. I know what it costs to sit beside someone you love while they fight to stay alive. The Raymond and June Alderton Fund started quietly, the way June herself had always done things. No press release, no ceremony. The first year we gave out 8 college scholarships to kids from Claiborne County who wouldn't have been able to afford tuition otherwise. We covered medical travel costs for 11 families. We funded a new reading program at the elementary schools. The second year, we doubled it. By the third year, we had a small board of local people. Corbett was on it, and a retired schoolteacher named Willa Booth, and the pastor of the Baptist church in town who had known June's grandmother. We met quarterly at the community center and argued pleasantly about where the money could do the most good. It was the best argument I'd ever been part of. I never sold the farmhouse. I fixed the porch rail. I replaced the roof. I put in a proper heating system and a reliable water heater, and I planted a kitchen garden on the south side of the house where the light was best. June had always wanted a kitchen garden. She'd never had time. Corbett taught me how to grow tomatoes and pole beans and the specific variety of butternut squash that did well in the mountain clay soil. I was terrible at it the first year. Better the second. By the third, I had more squash than I knew what to do with and started leaving bags of it on neighbors' porches. Preston and Nadia divorced 18 months after the conservatorship call. I heard it from Sandra, who heard it from the county clerk, so small world, legal filings. Preston had apparently moved on quickly to another acquisition target, a widow in Chattanooga with a timber property. Nadia was living back in Ohio, working for a hospital system in Columbus. She called me on Father's Day the second year. We talked for 45 minutes. It wasn't easy. But it wasn't nothing either. I told her about the fund. She was quiet for a while, and then she said, "That sounds like Mom." It did. It sounded exactly like June. I'm 69 years old now, and I wake up most mornings to the sound of the creek and the birds in the tree line and the distant hum of the quarry equipment starting up. I drink my coffee on the porch, where June's grandmother drank hers. I read, I tend the garden, I drive down to the community center on the second Thursday of every month for board meetings. June spent 2 years dying and 2 years protecting me at the same time. She left me 40 acres she'd never been able to explain in words. She left me a letter that said the land knows things I never had the words to say. She left me enough to live on and enough to give away, which I think is the only kind of enough that matters. I still carry her photograph. Gatlinburg, 2009, face tipped up toward the sun. I still talk to her sometimes, standing at the creek in the evening, when the light comes through the tree line exactly right. I don't know if she hears me. I'm not sure it matters. I say the things I should have said when I had the chance, and I say thank you for the things I didn't know I needed to be thankful for until it was too late to say it to her face. The roses she planted along the fence line bloomed this spring for the first time since I arrived. Yellow, every one of them, her favorite color. I left them exactly as they were.